You have heard 3 threshold moments. In this video, one more, the closing arc of the session. Then we move from individual calls to practice. The experienced-MCC calibration test. The question set that holds up to assessor consensus when you have to make the call alone before you bring a recording to peer calibration. A closing arc moment from the recording. Then the calibration test. 3 questions you ask of any moment where you find yourself reaching for exceeds. Then how to use the test on your own evaluations. The test exists, so the moments where you hesitate get resolved on the right side. The test is the practice that catches all bias before it lands in your rating sheet. Moment 4, 38 minutes, 23 seconds. The closing arc of the session. The statement is M8.3 paired with M7.1. Closing the session, expanding perspective. The threshold call is on whole session synthesis. Listen, Alex at 38:23 asks, and as you are seeing that expanded barrier, how do you see that pedestal that we started with? The client at 38:32 answers, it seems to be the same height as the floor inside the barrier. It does not seem like a climb. It just seems like the floor. Alex at 38:42 says, so it seems like you just stepped forward. The case for meets. The coach returns to the opening image. The client closes the narrative arc. The session has done what M8.3 asks. The client confirms the session has met her measure of success and leaves with a foundation for forward movement. The case for exceeds. A single question pulls 40 minutes of work into one image. Whole session synthesis compressed into 12 words. The pedestal that was a climb at the top of the session is now the floor inside an expanded barrier. And the coach lets the client describe the change in her own words. The discriminating signal is artistry, not a skilled return to the opening image. A single question that collapses the entire arc into one resonant image and lets the client describe what stepping forward feels like in her own words. The closing reflection from the coach, so it seems like you just stepped forward, is restraint. The coach does not interpret. The client has already done the work. Now the test, 3 questions. 1, would another experienced MCC hearing this in isolation rate it exceeds without hesitation? 2, can you name the specific evaluator consideration that lifts the moment? 3, did this specific moment carry the artistry, or are you generalizing from the session? 3 yeses is exceeds. Hesitation on any one of the 3 is meets. Meets at MCC is mastery, not criticism. The test exists to make the rating defensible, not to restrict exceeds. What the test catches is the failure mode that lives in every assessor, all bias. The session is impressive. The moment gets pulled along. The rating drifts upward without specific evidence. The test is mechanical. It is meant to be. When the listening is doing work that calibration cannot, the test is what closes the gap. Question 1 in practice. The isolation test. Strip the moment from the context that came before and after. Imagine an MCC assessor hearing only this single turn, cold with the statement in view. Would they reach for exceeds without argument? If you have to argue the case is meets. The argument itself is the signal. Exceeds at MCC does not require argument. It requires recognition. When you find yourself constructing the case for exceeds, that is your cue to drop to meets. and write the developmental note that helps the candidate understand why their proficient mastery did not yet rise to exemplary in this moment. Question 2 in practice. The specificity test. Demonstration, artistry, or uniqueness. Which one of the three? Can you point to the specific signal in the audio? Felt strong is not a consideration. Name it precisely. The consideration is the rating. Without it, you do not have one. If you cannot pick one, the moment is probably meets. Multiple considerations may be in play, but one of them has to be the discriminator, the lens that does the lifting work. If no single lens carries the weight, you are looking at proficient competence, not exemplary mastery. Question 3 in practice. The moment test. Did this turn carry the artistry alone, or did the accumulated goodwill of the whole session make this moment feel bigger than it is? Whole session lift is all bias, not exceeds. The moment must stand on its own when isolated. The check is, would I rate this turn exceeds if I had only heard the last 60 seconds of audio? If the answer is no, if it is the previous 38 minutes that are doing the lifting, the rating is meets. The previous 38 minutes are evidence for the other moments, not for this one. When you are genuinely unsure, and you will be, bring the moment to peer calibration. Argue both sides aloud. State the case for meets in full. State the case for exceeds in full. The argument that requires less reaching is usually the right call. The one where you have to construct the evidence is usually telling you something. Peer calibration is not a tiebreaker, it is a discipline. Every experienced MCC assessor has moments they bring to colleagues. That is what experienced means. The instinct to bring the moment to peer review is itself a calibration signal worth listening to. 3 yeses is exceeds. Any hesitation is meets. Meets at MCC is mastery. The test is what makes the rating defensible to another assessor and useful to the candidate you are preparing. The candidate does not need to hear that you felt their coaching was strong. They need to hear what the discriminating signal was on the moments that landed at exceeds and what would have lifted the moments that landed at meets. The test is what makes that feedback specific. In the next unit, 9.4, you put both skills, artistry recognition and the threshold call, into independent practice. You evaluate the full recording on your own, write developmental feedback, and reflect on the biases that surfaced for you during the evaluation.